Audiomo Podcast number 4. I have my co-host Dave Nelson with me today. How are you doing today, David?
Oh, pretty good. How about yourself?
It's been a day. I hate working on Bigsby guitars, but we'll get to that later. I want to start off today's podcast because the last two podcasts, it seemed like we were really railing on Gibson guitars. And today they announced a new series of guitars that are not electrics, but they're acoustics, and I'd like to get your thoughts on them. So I sent you the link. They're called, what are they called?
Generation Collection. Yep,
The
yep.
Generation Collection. And the kicker to me is they're made in America for $1,000 starting at that. And I have to say personally, I'm impressed with that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I am too. I played a handful of Gibson Acoustics, and I think they're always they're pretty good. I've never been like floored by one. And I think, we've talked about this a bunch of times. I feel like this is where it really comes down to like, is the American tag really, kind of the different, like, is it enough for the normal buyer to be like, hey, this is a great deal? Or are they just going to see $1,000 guitar and not care where it's being made? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree with you on the Gibson Acoustics. The Dove is the first one that I have that I was like, okay, I understand why this is so much. Because I've played songwriters before, and I thought they're good. They're not bad, but I didn't think that they were worth that kind of money. That's just me.
So yeah, there are some that are great. There are some that are not so great, and you're kind of like left with sort of like this mixed bag, and they're not as bad as like Martin, I would say, right? I personally don't really love Martins, right? I've played some really, really nice Martins that played fantastic, and I played some really nice Martins that played really awful. And I do feel like, at least with Gibson, they're always fine, right? I've never played like a truly terrible Gibson acoustic, but again, I still just, I wonder, like, for me, the first thing not the first thing I check on a guitar is where it's being made, and I feel like a lot of other people are probably the same way, that they're just going to be like, hey, it's $1,000 acoustic, and like they don't care that it's made in America.
No, I agree with you 100% with that one. I have to say, I'm not a big fan of Martins either. I think the best of the major three when it comes to the American acoustic makers is Taylor. They're the ones that I put on the pedestal as far as like just overall quality and consistency. But going back to Taylor and then going back to these Gibsons, the Taylor $1,000 guitar is Mexican made. Now, that guitar is going to come with some sort of electronic system in it. Neither one of them is going to come with a hard shell case. But, I mean, the fact that these Gibsons are being made in Montana, that's pretty cool to me. And we were talking about the sound hole that's on the side of these things. And you were asking, what is that that's hideous? So I'm going to explain it to you. Basically, what it is so that when you're the performer, it's providing feedback with you in a way that it wouldn't normally be able to do that. It's been done before in the past, but yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'd be curious, like, especially because they got what looks like a plastic lining kind of thing going on. Like, I wonder, do you just get that like real bright, nasty, gross sounding shit on it or whatever, where it's just like, yeah, I guess you can kind of hear yourself a little bit better, but it just sounds like absolute crap. I don't know. I haven't played one, so I don't know if it's just a gimmick or not.
What I'd be curious to know then, how do you record that thing? Because in theory, because you're going to use a pencil condenser style or, a regular condenser. Normally I'll do two. One big condenser kind of in front of the sound hole and then a pencil pointed towards the 12th fret. So how's that going to interfere with that when you're actually recording with a guitar like that? That's kind of the thing I'm wondering.
Well, I think for sure it would be absolute hell if you had somebody who was playing guitar and singing at the same time, right? Because you're shooting guitar straight at the vocal mic, right? Of course, it'd just be awful. But yeah, I mean, I think you stay as far away from that thing as possible, right? And hopefully it doesn't bleed into the normal mic setup that you've got going on. I think that's kind of all you can do, right?
Yeah, now I hadn't even really thought about that part of it until we just started talking because I was just so impressed with the fact that Gibson did something that is seemingly affordable compared to what they're normally offering that I was like, whoa, like great job, you guys. And now that I'm thinking about recording it, I'm like, I don't know that that's so practical. However, there's a few models of them. The cheapest one that comes with electronics in it, I think, is $15.99, which that's not terrible pricing either, especially when you're getting into the big brands, the Martins and the Taylors. I'm not sure what the cheapest ones of those are actually at this point.
I think Taylor has a $700 model that comes with some 7 to 8 that comes with electronics.
But is
I
it
believe?
But American, made in America?
Yeah, no,
That's
no,
what I'm
definitely
curious.
not. That's the yeah, yeah. I don't know. I'm also kind of on the fence about acoustic unless you're a serious gigging musician, acoustic with electronics in it. I'll take a mic on an acoustic any day personally, So like for me, that's not a break point, right? Like I don't care to spend an extra $500 on electronics, right? When I just have a decent mic that'll do the job. But that's obviously it's personal preference. But I think you're right. I think if you're talking American made with electronics, they're probably all in the same ballpark.
Okay, I'm looking at Martin. Apparently, there's a D15M that is made in America with no electronics involved with that. Apparently, I'm not so positive. But, I mean, yeah, at that point, and you know what? That Martin comes with a hard shell case. So maybe they didn't hit as big of a home run. Maybe it's just the fact that my standards for Gibson are so low that that I
do
saw
anything.
yeah, that I saw $1,000 acoustic guitars, and I was like, whoa. I'm like, that's really cool, because obviously my Dove is not a cheap instrument. That's a really high-end Gibson, so I don't normally associate their lower end pricing to be anything decent. However, I'll be interested to see as people get these in their hands what they sound like, especially mic'd up, because with that extra sound hole, that'll make for some interesting kind of noises.
Definitely. I mean, and obviously to get back on our classic rail on Gibson, I will say that I find all of these guitars absolutely hideous. I don't know there's something about this, like one, they got a couple of the concert style shapes and then the dreadnought shapes and then the cutaways, and none of them look good. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
I think the cheapest one's the best looking one. It looks like a Martin 00. That would be the one I would like, and I like it because it's almost like a parlor size instrument, and those are really comfortable to play, especially if you're playing smaller, more intimate shows. You don't have to worry so much about space. They're really comfortable guitars. But I have to agree with you. Which is it that I can't stand? The G200. The dude, it's so ugly. Not a big fan, but some people love them.
Yeah. I get that. How many acoustics do you have? Just the Dove?
One. Well, no, technically I have two, but I mean, I don't. The other one has a broken neck, so I can't play.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
It doesn't. It doesn't count. Yeah, no, I bought that. I got that guitar in Spain when I was much younger, and one of my buddies that when I was at Full Sail, they had way too hard of a partying night, and I was at my girlfriend's house, and I came back, and it was smashed, and the neck was literally detached from the body. It didn't break at the headstock. It broke at the actual base. And they're like, what happened, man? And I'm like, what the hell do you mean what happened? Like, you were here. What did you guys take? What did you do? And they're like, we don't remember anything, man. Like, we're sorry, And I'm like, you gonna pay for it? They're like, oh, we're kind of broke right now. Just spent all of our money on beer. I'm like, oh, well, you guys are the worst humans I've ever met in my life.
It's pretty par for the course for Full Sail, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it ended up getting fixed, but the problem is I can't adjust the neck on it because of where the break is, so it's art.
Yeah. And we talked about this before. They're never the same after something like that happens and you try to put them back together, But yeah, I've only got one myself too, and it's a Taylor, and I would never go anything else. And yeah, it's just... This is a cool offering from them. It's cool to see them delving into this, I think, like territory of price. But yeah, I don't know. I would want to see them play up the American thing more, and maybe even just in name, right? Like Gibson Acoustic Generation Collection does not scream, hey, this is made in America. Like you have to look for it, right? Like what if they called it the Americana Collection or something like that? That said they're built in America and you're getting American guitar for this kind of price. You know what I mean?
That would have been so much smarter. Like that's like twice in the two podcasts that we've just done in the last two of them where you have outsmarted the marketing teams of two major companies, because that makes so much more sense. The American Americana or something like that. It's so simple, but it would
Right.
really that's genius. Where this, I didn't remember what it was called, and I was just looking at the damn things before we started the podcast because I made it a point that I wanted to talk about them, and the name meant that little to me that I didn't
Yeah, well,
remember.
and I mean, it's not doing them any favors, right? If their whole selling point here is that it's American and it's under a price point that American guitars don't get to, give me something to tell me it's American. You know, like I'm not googling this stuff all the time before I'm looking at. I'm certainly not googling it as I pick it up at a Guitar Center, if any of them still exist anymore. Anyway, you know what I mean?
No, I agree. It's weird though, but you made a good point, and it's funny that we're on the same wavelength about this because we've never talked about this. We both only have one acoustic, and I go through a lot of electric guitars, and you have a few for yourself too. I think you have 4 or 5. But when it comes to the acoustic, like I have the one, I've never felt the need to shop for another one. I just haven't. It just works.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I know there are other people on the side of this. Actually, my next door neighbor, he plays in a bluegrass band, and he's got like, I don't know, probably like 20 acoustic guitars, right? And I mean, he's got some like $15,000 Martins, and they are amazing for sure. And they all have, you know, different flares and different vibes and whatever. But like, I feel like in the world of acoustic, if you want to go get one workhorse acoustic, like you get a really decent Taylor, and then it's going to do everything for you well, right? Like, whereas with an electric, right, you could argue maybe you could get a Tele and it would cover most of your use cases, right? But like anybody who really plays electric knows, like, okay, no, I need something with like big humbuckers. I need something, you know, single coil. I need a couple of things to cover multiple areas. Whereas like, I don't know, the acoustic just doesn't feel the same way unless you're like an acoustic guy, you know?
Yeah, I think mics have a lot to do with it too, because you can manipulate so much more with an acoustic, giving the mic and the preamp, whereas a Telecaster, it's always kind of going to sound like a Telecaster, especially on the bridge pickup. It's going to beef up, but it's never going to sound like a full-on humbucker guitar. It's just not going to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And you can't really fake it. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, a little bit. I mean, but at that point, you have so much gain on. What the hell does it matter what guitar you're using?
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Yep, that's true.
All right, so moving on to our next topic, you had something that you wanted to talk about from a little brand called Hughes and Kettner. So I'll leave the floor to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, so first off, I guess I want to get your opinion. What do you think of when you think of Hughes and Kettner? Because they're a brand I find interesting in the fact that I feel like their public kind of persona, at least to me, has like kind of gone all over the place. Like, I think initially when I first heard about them, I thought they were doing like affordable, you know, kind of high gain, like multi-purpose stuff. And I think that was maybe when the Spirit lines came out, when they were, but those are meant to be, you know, that it sort of fit into that area. And then, you know, they have their other amps that are like crazy, crazy expensive. And I don't know, I heard a couple of demos and I always thought like, yeah, you know, they're just like one of those brands. And, you know, and then I've heard some other demos and I'm like really blown away by a few of their things. But I'm curious if maybe I'm just like out of the loop with this brand. What do you feel about them?
The first thing I think of when I think of Hughes and Kettner, do not laugh because this is a very serious answer. I think of Japanese visual kai metal music because I swear to God, it's the first thing I think of. Because
I'm sure it is.
I watched a lot of live performances because some of the guitars were so intricate and good. I'm like, there's no way they can do this live. Obviously, they could, but I'd always see the blue lights in the background live, and I was like, oh, so those are like super cool metal amps. I've never thought of them as anything other than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, obviously I lean more towards the metal stuff than I think that you do. So like I've had sort of different experiences with sort of what their products come out. But recently I saw this cool video from Sonic Drive Studio. I don't know if you're familiar with his channel, but he did a channel on this, the Ant-Man, which I hadn't heard of before. And I don't know, lately I've been like really interested in these sort of pedal-sized amps and kind of the idea of like how much can we really jam into one and how great can they sound, right? Obviously, you know, you got stuff like the Victory stuff, right, where they do like the Kraken or the V30 and just a preamp pedal, and now they even do one with a power amp too. Like, it's just crazy the kind of value you're getting out of these. Like, they're beyond micro amps at this point. They're pedal amps, right? Like, it's kind of crazy. And this Ant-Man sounds great. And you know, what do you think about the? Obviously, you know, you're on the Cortex, right? You're doing, and I know you had a Helix at 1.2, so like you're doing the whole modeling thing. What do you think about the idea of doing like a pedal amp as well as, you know, something that's kind of in the digital realm? Like, what are your thoughts about the two?
I considered getting the orange pedal baby instead of the Black Star because I thought to myself, well, I could put that on the pedal board too. And then all I have to bring with me is the pedal board and the cabinet, right? And then I'm good to go. I still don't love kind of the sheer clean tones from any of those things that I've heard. And because I'm playing primarily clean stuff and it's just such a focal point of the genre, I still got to go with tube amp. It's just how it is for right now. I mean, it'll get there, and it's not that any of this stuff sounds bad. And I don't know if you've heard the new clean amps, especially they did a Morgan, the Captain 50 on the Quad Cortex. The clean on that, oh my god, it's the best one I've ever heard. So I think that they're getting there. I got to play through a Kraken, and I mean, total opposite end of the spectrum. I know, but it was brutal, and I couldn't believe that something that little, and it almost looks like, just like a toy pedal. Not like a toy, but you know what I mean. Like, it just looked, it has that look about it. Like, could I really trust this to go out and play, like, a show with? And absolutely you can.
Yeah, I mean the Victory stuff is just incredible. So I had a friend who had a Kraken and a friend who had the V30, and I love the Kraken. I think it sounds amazing. It's kind of useless, I think, as a live amp because it only does super high distortion, right? Yeah, and it does it so well. It really does it so well. But like, if you need any kind of clean tone, like, you got to go with the V30, right? You got a clean channel, and then you've also got the Kraken style overdrive and distortion channel, which I think works really nicely. I think it does exactly what it's trying to do, and then you've got a really usable clean channel on the V30 side. So I will sing Victory's praises all day. I think they do great stuff. But what I think is also really cool about this, and not so much even from the power amp side of it, although I do want to get back to that. What's cool that I haven't seen a ton of people do is the versatility you could have with another amp, right? Like, so let's say you've got a head and a cab, or even a combo, and you've got an effects loop, and you run this through your effects loop, you've got an entirely different amp that you can call with just a basic channel switch, right? And I think, like, the power in that to have, let's say you go out there with your Black Star, you've got something super clean, and then you pull one of these Amp Mans or you pull one of these Victory preamps or whatever, and then suddenly you've got the most ripping distortion amp ever on the other side, and you can just hop between them like it's no big deal, right? I mean, I think that's super cool.
No, that's a pretty cool way to look at it. I think that for somebody who doesn't want to spend a ton of money on something like the Quad Cortex, excuse me, that's a really good alternative for not a lot of money, because you can get, like you said, such an extreme diversity of palette depending on which one of these little guys that you pick from. And the Victory ones, they are really specifically flavored. But yeah, the other one, is it the Sheriff? Is the Sheriff the third one that they make? That's the one that I if they make that in the small one, that's the one that I would pick, because it's kind of like right in between. The Danish Pete one's a little too clean for me. I want a little bit more from a brand like that. It would be like going to Fender and trying to get a Mesa sound. Like, why would I do that?
Yeah. You're barking up the wrong tree for sure. But yeah, I mean, even that, right? Like, we're talking about the Kraken kind of being like a one-trick pony. Like, you put it in the effects loop of another amp that does the other stuff, suddenly it's the best distortion amp you can have alongside, whatever you pair it with, the best clean amp you can have, right? I think that's super cool. But I do actually want to get back to you were talking about the power amp and the pedals there. I know, like, I was kind of doing the same thing, looking for some options for a while, and I know, like, I heard some demos of the Duncan's got the power stage, and it definitely had that problem where it was just like, it's kind of like playing a guitar amp through a PA. Like, it just doesn't feel right. But I have heard that because the pedal baby's doing is a Class D power, that it's a little more, it's a little more vibey. It's not quite to tube range, but it's like not that like super sterile, clean power amp. Have you played through one?
I did for about 20 minutes, but I mean, it was at a Guitar Center. It's hard to get a real gauge of anything at Guitar Center, and it's not with my rig. I mean, I had my Telecaster with me, but I didn't.
Yeah,
it's not the same thing, and I don't know. That's the other crappy thing. But yeah, I happened to go in there because I was trying to sell a guitar to somebody else, and when the guy left, I was like, well, I'm already here, and I'm never in Guitar Center, so let me try some stuff out. And that was one of the things that caught my eye. But I don't know. I thought it was cool, but I just don't know. There's something about the really small watt low wattage, small combo tube amps that they just get these cleans that I've yet to hear realistic yet from any of these things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will say it's not an economical solution, but I did. Yeah. Well, I did actually get a chance to. I obviously have a bunch of tube amps here that I use all the time, and I have my tube amp running through a cab. And just for shits, I did hook the Helix up to the effects return. Obviously disabled all the cab and power amp stuff that I have going through there, and it sounds fucking amazing. Like when you run it through an actual power amp section and through a cab, like it is incredible. Like somebody's got to figure out a way to do it well, to do some sort of pedal baby or like a power stage or something that is tube powered, because like the Helix sounds amazing when you can dial it in properly, as obviously the quad cortex would as well. Like with an actual tube power amp behind it going through a real cab, if you could figure out a real like actual compact way to do it that's worth more than just having a tube amp with you, like it would be pretty awesome. And I'm kind of surprised that nobody does it. I don't, or at least nobody that I know of does a tube power amp, kind of solution.
Yeah. I know Blackstar does it, but I think it's in the preamp section. I think it's a 12AX7. It's not a power tube. So that's interesting. I never thought of that before, as far as the kind of other end of the spectrum here is the power amp going through the powering to the effects loop. That's very interesting. And I actually did that same trick with the Helix when I had it.
Yeah.
I ran it through the effects loop of the KT88 Blackstar I had. Because the problem with that amp, and if anybody's ever shopping for that amp, it's technically a 2-channel amp, but when you switch from the clean to the drive, it's got to be like a 15 dB jump. So there's absolutely no way that if you're playing live you could do it. So I was trying to find workarounds, and that's what we do. We're fiddlers. So I ran that through that, and I was very pleasantly surprised. It sounded way better.
Yeah.
But you have to remember to disable the cabinet on the Helix though. Otherwise, it's
otherwise
pointless.
It sounds awful. Yeah. I was using the MT15, the Tremonti PRS, and obviously I think it's got like 6 EL34s in it or something ridiculous, maybe 4. But you're running any of those amps through that power section, through a decent cab, and there's no way it's not going to sound good. So I don't know. There must be some reason that somebody hasn't gone, let's just build a tube power amp section and sell that. Like what? I guess I just don't know why they wouldn't, or why somebody hasn't already, right? Especially with the prevalence of modelers now, because it would be the perfect companion to it.
Now, are you thinking about something that you could put on your pedal board specifically, or are you thinking of something to have on the back? Because I think that's a relevant question.
Yeah, I think the pedal baby proves that maybe somebody wants one that is very small, that still can sit on top of a cab and be just like kind of, I guess, lightweight, or, obviously pedal board would be kind of ideal, I think. I think that's what everyone's sort of shooting for, especially with, like Duncan's Power Stage. But they have one too that's a rack size as well. They have the pedal one, and then they have the huge one that goes on a cab too. So I guess both, but, I don't know. I think pedal would probably be the place to start.
Okay. With that in mind, then, I think I know why they haven't done it, and I'm going to chalk it all up to durability and fragility. And that might not be something me or you would have to worry about, but things get thrown around when people are helping you load in and load out. You've had it happen. People can be a little bit rough, and what happens if you have that on your big old board, and, even just a slight drop, if your tube shatters in that, you are dead. You're dead. So
well, then, I think then you have to do an on top of cab solution, right? And there are versions of them, right? So obviously people buy them,
Yeah, but at that point, why not just get a head, just a regular head? Because
I guess that's the argument. Yeah.
Yeah, because at this point you've gone so far out of the way to not have a guitar head, to realizing that you need a guitar head.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and realistically, the guitar head already does that, and it gives you a preamp section, so it's like, yeah, you might as well. Yeah, you talked me out of it. I talked myself out of it. I got it. All right. I was going to start up a company. I had the will, but you defeated me.
Well, I saved you before you filed your expensive paperwork and patents.
There you go. Yeah.
It's a funny way to look at it, but
Yeah, yeah.
before we leave this entirely, because I didn't think we were going to be on this long, but I wanted to know what was it about the Hughes and Kettners, especially the Amp Man, that you liked so much about it? What made it different?
Well, so I think it's cool that they're doing the sagging, presence, and resonance as their controls. I feel like I really like how Orange does their setups where they just give you the tone knob and they just spend the time to make the tone knob work as opposed to being lazy about it and just giving you fewer controls. And it really felt like Hughes and Kettner were doing that same thing here, right? There's just a tone knob. You can dial it. It feels like it's actually, doing the right stuff, all the way left or all the way right. It's never getting non-usable. So I think it's cool that they're including the sagging stuff to really give you that tube-like vibe. And then, I feel like in this size and space, like the presence and the resonance often get kind of tossed off. And to me, especially in high gain, they're kind of the most important, tone shaping elements, right? So it's cool that they're doing it. And to be honest with you, the other thing is, and this may just be because Sonic Drive Studio, that guy is amazing with his tones. It just sounded good. I mean, he was using the modern and he got a bevy of tones from clean to super heavy that just all felt really good, And like we were talking about with the Victory stuff, like I really like their preamps and I really like those pedal preamps that they sell, but they kind of do their thing. And this was sort of a much wider gambit of sounds, which was cool. And I haven't seen that out of something so small before, I think. Like I don't know if you remember when Vox tried those like super tiny guys. They were like this big and they had like a new tube in them or whatever. And it's like they have one for every like sound that you can get. And it's like, why can't you just make one that does all the sounds? Like you got to make, there's like a clean one and then there's like a British one and then there's like a heavy, like,
Yeah, it was the Valvetronics kind of taken back and then individually packaged into separate little things. When the Valvetronics, the whole package used to be a combo amp. In case you're not familiar, it's something.
I own one. I have one. I have the head, and I think it's great. Actually, it's like it was the first round, not before it got really shitty. It was the original Valvetronics, and I have the 100-watt head.
Is that the one with the blue and black cloth on the front?
No, it's silver, and it was so cheap. I have the full cab that comes with it too, the full stack cab, and it's sitting in my garage gathering dust because it sounds like absolute ass. But the head sounds like pretty good, and I will swear by this, even though I'll plug it in and struggle to get tones out of it for an hour. But I swear there was a point in my life where I could dial that thing in and it sounded really good.
Now I'll tell everybody about an amp that you praised for years, talking about amps that you would never think would sound good, but for whatever godforsaken reason sounded great. I immediately think of that Crate amp.
Dude, that amp sounds amazing. I swear. I have no idea. You know what's funny? That's actually sitting in my garage as well, gathering dust. But the problem is that it's one of those ridiculous like starter amps that has like a million presets. It's 120 watts for no reason, and it has like all the extra effects, and it broke. The effects part of it broke, and now it's like stuck in low octave mode, and I can't get it to come off. But for some reason, I swear that amp does actually sound amazing. It's like one of those old ass Crate. I don't even know what the model number is. It's an old ass Crate. It's a combo amp. I got it. It was like my first amp after my starter amp. My parents bought it for me. They had no idea what they were like doing. I think they just like went to Guitar Center and they were like, "My son plays guitar. Like, I need to buy him a new amp for his birthday or something." And for some reason, it sounds good. It sounds good. I will stand by the old Crate stuff. Sounds all right.
It blew my mind because you were in a band called Gunpowder Temple at the time, and you were showing me some of the demo stuff. And this is when I didn't really, at that school in particular, there was a lot of people there that were into music, right? But not a lot of people either A, really worked on music, were working on music, or were, decent enough engineers working on other people's stuff. So when I hear your guys' stuff and you're like, yeah, we're doing this all in-house, we have a whole studio set up with drums and everything, I'm like, this is going to be amazing. I go over there and I can't wait to see what you guys are using. You have the drums set up in the back left corner. You have the desk in the top corner. Next to the bed is this Crate amp. And you're like, oh, dude, you plug your Telecaster into that. And I was like, what, sir? I was like, you want me to what? Like, no, I'm not gonna, like, no, it's a crate. And you're like, dude, just trust me. If, like, just a little bit of drive, trust me. And I'll never, I have that somewhere. But I remember just listening back and being like, how the hell did the crate get, like, that natural kind of edge of breakup Telecaster tone? Like, it, like, nailed it almost. So you had some magic.
I honestly think either I got some like weird one off the line that's somehow, broken to sound good, or like we dropped it out of the back of a moving truck like one too many times and just like knocked something loose that made it sound amazing. But there's something about that amp. It just sounds good. And I don't know what it is. But I will say, like, to our shitty setup, the whole thing was, and, I'm sure we'll have a whole episode about Full Sail at some point. But the whole thing was Full Sail promised us that we were going to go and we were going to spend all this time in these amazing studios, right? Like, they were like, look at all these toys. Look at all these toys you're going to be able to play with all the time, right? And everybody was sucked in. That was like the whole thing, right? They're just like, they flash all this shit in front of you and they're like, yeah, you can just like walk into any studio, like 1 a.m, you want to record, go do it, right? Complete bullshit. Total bullshit. But, we were one of the few people, like, I think everybody in the band at that time were one of the few people who were like, dude, all I want to do is record, but I have no fucking money, like none at all, right? So we were like, we're going to go to school and we're going to go sit in these studios all day and we're just going to make amazing music, right? And then they were like, you can't go into the studios. Like, what are you kidding? So we were like, all right, we're just going to do it at home then, I guess, because what other choice do we have? So, yeah, that's all we did. We sat around with our horrible, junky ass equipment and just recorded it until we figured out how to make it sound good. And, we kind of did.
Yeah, I thought you guys did a really good job, especially given the time frame when, we didn't have this understanding of basically anything outside of the fundamentals at that point. And granted, you were ahead of a lot of people there because I don't know how we're not going to turn this into a full Sail episode right now, but there were people that didn't know such basic things that at this point, given how long was it, a decade ago? People that were probably 7 to 8 years old would know this stuff just from having an iPad. And these people just looked at it like it was Russian. And I just remember sitting in class and just looking around like, oh my God, I've just been scammed. Like, I'm going to learn nothing. I have just lost all of my money. I don't know what the purpose of any of this was.
Yeah, but I think where the big difference comes in, and this is why, there's very few people from those years that I keep up with. Obviously, you're one, and maybe like, I can think of like 2 other people that would, answer a phone call from me, right? And it's because we all realized that like 2 months in, right? And then some of us just went, all right, I'm going to get the fuck out of here, or like, I'm going to pass. And some of us went, all right, I got to figure out what I can learn from this experience, right? And we were just like, okay, they're only going to give us like 12 hours a month with the studio shit. Like, I'm going to touch everything in there and I'm going to figure out how it works. And I'm going to figure out how, which of these teachers are not, kids who just fucking graduated or are not full of shit. And I'm going to ask them a million questions and I'm going to figure out what I can do when I get out of here. Because like you said, we didn't have like, fucking GarageBand on an iPad at the time. Like, everything we were learning, we had to fuck up first before we figured out how to learn, like, to do it, right? It wasn't like, oh, I just hit record on, my phone or something and like something usable comes out. Like, that's insane. But, I really feel like we went to school with so many people who were just like, okay, I'll pass the test and we'll get out of here and then I'll go work in a studio and figure it out then. And it's like, of course, Full Sail has a terrible name because everybody went out there and did that. And then it was like, oh, you don't know shit. And then, the studio fires them and then they go, I'm never hiring a kid from Full Sail again. And for the 10 of us that went through the program that actually knew what the fuck we were doing, we were like, thanks for ruining it for us, guys. Like, I really appreciate it,
And they did. And that's the problem. I had several studios in Los Angeles that were like, yeah, like everything sounds good because I basically listed Full Sail last. Like, I wrote about all the stuff I had done other than that and all the other studios I worked in New York. And when it came to that, I was like, yeah, Full Sail. And they're like, oh, so, yeah, how'd you like it there? And I'm like, yeah, I hated it there. And I'm like, and I'm in great debt because of this decision. And they're like, yeah, like we don't hire people from there. So good luck. You know, you maybe start at a smaller studio or somewhere else. And that was a small studio. So I'm like, I'm screwed.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get anything out, out of it. I mean, I do this on my own now, but only because, I have the means to do those kinds of things. Like, I looked for work for like a year and a half after I got out, trying to find something in the field and found nothing. And then I ended up taking work, doing other stuff I could do because you have to work at some point, right? And yeah, man, it's disappointing. It sucks that that they are the way that they are. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen that they've gotten sued a fair few amount of times now. So, I mean, I guess maybe something has changed, but like you said, we met a lot of great people. There are people there that, like, obviously aside from the couple, I think that are worth it out to the band. It was great. I'm still, really good friends with, obviously, with all those guys, and that was cool. But yeah, it just, they're like, it's just a big scam. And I think it's pretty obvious now. You can do a quick Google. And we should have known. Any college with commercials is a fucking scam.
Well, the moment that we should have known was when you had to do your on the phone interview from remote location, because obviously nobody went to Full Sail for any of that. It wasn't a real school. And basically they asked you like 5 questions. They're like, do you like music? Do you play any instruments? Do you see yourself working in the music industry or maybe scoring for film? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, does normal education not work for you? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you guys, like, this is amazing. And they're like, well, we have good news for you. Your loan, I mean, you have been accepted to Full Sail University.
Yep. Your check did not bounce and you have been accepted. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure when you go interview for Harvard that they're just trying so hard to sell you on it. Like, do you really want to be a lawyer? Like, it's just so ridiculous, man. I can't. I'm like, look back and I'm just embarrassed that we fell for it, I mean, whatever. Like, we're here doing this now. So, I guess it all worked out, but, yeah.
We were going to do this one way or another. And
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
the thing to take away from it. And the nice thing is that I met you and the other Dave, and a few other people, and I mean things have worked out. A lot of outside things that had nothing to do with music have worked out because of that school. So I mean, in that aspect, it wasn't truly a waste. I don't believe anything is truly a waste. However, I will say this: if you're a younger person and you live in this country, or even worse, if you're a younger person and you don't live in this country and you are considering, because we knew people that did this, that came from wherever they were coming from and went to Full Sail University thinking, oh, I'm going to come to America, I'm going to go to this school, and I'm going to go and learn everything about music or film or whatever it is. Save your money. You will learn more on YouTube. Genuinely, you will learn more. There was one thing that I learned that is still applicable to this day, and it was a kind of situational miking of guitar cabinet. I forget which lab it was in, but the actual console was the old Neve, where two of the faders didn't work. But I was miking up an AC-15, and I was like, it just doesn't sound big enough. And the lab professor, he saw that I was like the only one actively trying to move placement and all this, and he just smirks at me, and he comes over and he goes, try this. He goes back into the mic locker. He takes the 609 off, leaves the 57 where it is. He puts the Royer right in front where the 609 was. And I'm like, you're just putting a ribbon mic on. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. He's just like, that's not all I'm doing. Then he put the U87 about 10 feet back. And he's like, now just record. He's like, it's not going to sound that great until after I show you what happens. So we push record. And then after, when we're doing playback through Pro Tools, he just slowly pushes that fader up and then plays with the pans a little bit, and the depth, like, it blew my mind just from that little bit of a room mic tone. And it opened my eyes completely to, all that kind of ambient. It's not ambient, but, ambient style as far as not being close mic to the cabinet. That's the one thing. And that's so sad that I went to that school, and that's the only legitimate piece of recording that I, to this day, remember and thought was good.
Yeah, I hear you. I think I probably have a couple, maybe. And again, it was because every time we were in lab, there was usually 2 guys who had graduated 3 months ago that were teaching, and 1 guy who had actually been in the studio who was in there. And we literally just grilled him like nonstop. We'd be like, what do you do when you get this? What do you do when you get this? What do you do when you get this? And we would like try to grab those like nuggets of stuff out. So I probably have a couple, like little techniques that we learned, but yeah, for the most part, we learned more. And even those techniques that he taught us, we learned more when we went home and did it later, none of that schooling happened while we were in it. But I will say, I want to go back to your point here where you're saying, if you're thinking about going to Full Sail, and Full Sail in general, yes, I would agree. Don't go to Full Sail. But what are your thoughts on going to a school to learn recording in general? Like I've had a few people who've come up to me afterwards and been like, "Hey, I'm going up to the school up in Maine, or there's a school out in, I think there's one out in Minnesota that's pretty popular, and they do recording degrees." And what are your thoughts? What do you tell them if they ask you that?
Never do it.
Under no
circumstances. The best, because okay, so here's the thing about it. Every studio is different from top to bottom. At the end of the day, yes, you're going for the same goal. But if you start out at the very bottom, the younger you do this, obviously, the better. The later, it's going to be rough because you're going to have to work a second job. But if you can learn everything about how that studio is routed, what exactly they have to work with in that specific studio as far as microphones, as far as preamps, as far as compressors, what's the sweet spot in the room, all that kind of stuff. When you can master that one studio, that entire process, it might seem like it's redundant and it's like, oh, well, you've only mastered that studio. That's not true. Because at that point, you can walk into another studio and you're going to easily be able to identify how it functions from the ground up. And that, to me, when you go into these already super perfect studios and you're like, all right, well, today we're going to be running through an 1176 and, just doing some vocal tracks through a U87 and whatever. Okay, yeah, it sounds great. And maybe you learn about how to get it to not clip, or maybe you learn how to use a de-esser or something like that, depending on the person's voice. However, you're not learning anything as far as how that studio operates. You're just learning about the gear that's in that studio right then. And it feels like in the recording schools, because I know somebody that went to that one in Minnesota, they said it was much better than Full Sail. They did 3 months of Full Sail, dropped out, and then went to that one in Minnesota. They said it was light and day, but they still wouldn't have done it because it was still, when they actually did get hired, that person did get a studio job. They basically had to do what I just said to begin with anyways. When they got in the door, it was, you are the bottom on the pole. You know what I mean? So it's tough.
Yeah. So I'm going to disagree on one point, and I would say there's one caveat to where I would disagree, and I would say if you somehow, for whatever reason, get your schooling covered, I think it's worth it to go. And only for the reason that you said earlier, where the circumstances around school and the people we met and the stuff that we did while we were there, because we were these types of people, 100% made it worth it for me. I'm extremely lucky. I'm in the position where Full Sail was covered for me. So, I'm not in debt because of Full Sail. And I will say that it colors my, kind of how I look at Full Sail, right? Obviously, I still think Full Sail's a scam. And I think, it sucks that I kind of wasted that. Even though I'm not paying it back, I wasted the money that went towards that I could have gone to something else. I don't love that part of it, but I will say, if you're in the situation where school's covered for you and you can go do that and you want to go learn recording, if you're the type of person that will learn in any situation, it's a great place to be, only because you're around a bunch of other people who are in that same situation as you, right? And that is kind of worth it, But otherwise, I think I would agree with you, right? Like, especially at Full Sail, when you walk into a $1 million studio, like, all we learned was the shit that you're never going to do ever again. I'm never going to be in a studio like that ever again. I'm never going to touch half the mics I touched in there. And, that's part of the draw, right? Like, that was kind of cool that we got to do that. And, like, a lot of people can't say that, but it's completely useless in a real studio. No one's going to be like, hey, how do you get a great drum room sound? And you go, well, you start with a live room that costs $500,000 to put together. And then you put $20,000 worth of mics around the kit and the drums sound amazing. Like, that's not useful.
Hey, you forgot the $500,000 API board.
That's true. Yeah. In the $1 million worth of outboard gear that they had behind that board. Yeah.
And
it's all necessary.
And one last thing, behind the outboard gear on the walls were the handmade custom
custom
diffuser
made.
panels.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll never
Yeah.
forget that
Yeah.
from the main
Yeah.
studio and they was bragging. It was, oh, those are $50,000, and I'm like, all right.
You know, what's funny is I see people make that shit on YouTube all the time for like, you know, a couple $100 worth of lumber from Home Depot. Like they're over here talking about how they're 50 grand a piece. It's like, in a weekend with some glue and a saw, I think we could all do the same thing. There's a free online tool that tells you what to do.
Yeah, and just to wrap up with this, I mean, I was assuming that the person that I was talking to saying don't do this was going to be paying for it out of pocket. So obviously, if it's going to be free, I mean, it kind of changes the situation a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, free is relative, but
but you know what I'm saying. Like if it's covered for you and you're not going to be almost 6 digits in debt, it's not. It's no. I would have bought a van. And instead of driving to Orlando, I would have driven straight to Southern California and owned the damn van and then just figured it out from there. But that's just me. So that was an interesting tangent, my friend.
Well, we can't bring up Full Sail without it becoming a tangent. I mean, we started it, and I still got, and as I'm sure you do, a few hundred stories that we could tell about Full Sail that don't paint it in a great light.
Okay, so you know what? Part of me wants to keep going with it, but part of me wants to go to something else and save it.
Yeah, we'll save it. Let's save it.
Okay, so I'll wrap with one question for you. Have you ever had a piece of gear, whether it's an amp or a guitar, that no matter how much money you put into it, no matter what you tried with it, you wanted to love it. You really wanted to love it, and then it just never did it for you?
I'm trying to think. I've done a pretty good job of getting rid of any of the gear, that does that for me. But I will say, maybe not a piece, but just a category. I have spent a lot of money over the years trying outboard gear, and I have just never gotten it to go the way I want it to. And I have a few pieces of outboard gear that just sit here and I never touch them because I have so many plugins that do all of it better at this point, and I really want to get into it. I have a tube preamp, like a 2-tube preamp here that does actually sound pretty good. And when I do use it, it's fine. I never feel like I have to use it, like, I don't know. And maybe it would be different if I really went and spent some money on some really nice outboard gear, but it just is an extra step I never think to take, so that's probably the best answer I've got.
Okay. Yeah, because I have such a thing with that stupid Jazzmaster, man. If I don't even I would love to see the bill one day, just like the overall bill for how much money I've put into this instrument, and the neck pickup is fantastic. It's to die for. It's so good, but the playability of it it's so unreliable. You're either going to be able to chord with it really well, and it doesn't matter if I shim it. I shimmed it. I put in a second shim. I adjust the truss rod. I know how to adjust the truss rod. I've worked on guitars all day. I've tried 5 different bridges with this thing. And then the bridge pickup itself, I hate the way the bridge pickup sounds. I always have. But I just can't get rid of the thing because every time... Well, I mean, first of all, my wife would shoot me in the face, literally, because that's like the guitar that we started writing with. So it's one of those unsellable guitars. But I have never had a piece of gear frustrate me as much as the that specific Fender Jazzmaster. And I don't know, it just was something that was on my mind, and I was just like, am I the only one that just doesn't give up? Because there's other gear that I've had where I'm just like, yeah, it doesn't work, and I'm just going to sell it, and I've sold it. Obviously, I sell lots of guitars.
Yeah, like we were talking about earlier, like when I was young and we had nothing to use, I totally would do that. Now, like, my time is so limited, to do this kind of stuff that if a piece of gear gets in my way, I get rid of it. It's just not worth it anymore. And I have enough, I'll say disposable income to solve most of my problems, when it comes to gear, that it's just like, I just don't bother to keep them around anymore. And obviously guitars that have sentimental value are kind of their own thing. They just sort of end up on the rack ultimately, which sucks, but like, I think you were saying you put a Bigsby on it.
Oh, no. Oh, don't get me started on that. That's the gold top Les Paul.
No.
That's the Les Paul. Okay. You know what? I am going to get started on that because I'm going to go there right now. So Everyone says when you get a Les Paul and you put a Bigsby on it, you got to put a roller bridge because the ABR style bridge is not good. You want as little friction as possible. In theory, makes a lot of sense. You know what I mean? So I said, all right, I'm gonna do that. And in the last video I made, where I compared the Cabronita, the Squire, in a blind test versus that ES Les Paul. The one guy I could tell, he's just like, you have bridge problems with that, and I'm like, yep, but I have a roller bridge. Fast forward to today. I install the roller bridge. I get everything locked in because it's one of the Tone Pros. So, you can, once you get it right where you want it to go, you can physically lock it in with an Allen wrench. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'm good to go. I'm golden. I restring the thing up. I got a good break angle on it. I know that you need that. It's not too flat. If I bend the B or the E string, even after lubricating everything, it jumps right out of the saddle. Every time it jumps right out. And I'm ready to just, once we get off this podcast, I'm ready to throw the ABR1 right back on it again and just deal with that little bit of rattling. It's just, I'm so frustrated.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't dealt with the Bigsby. It's not my style, right? So I don't have a guitar with Bigsby's in them. And although I will say they look cool, for sure. I wouldn't not buy a guitar because they had one. Well, maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. I had a guitar with a floating trem, and I was having the same. It was just always a problem. Like, it's just. I even had the tremolo, like a stopper in the back and everything to keep it from. Because, like, I'm not a shredder. I don't dive bomb. I don't do all that shit. So I was just like, I'm going to lock it, and, I'm going to stop worrying about it. And even still, it was just always a bitch. And it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, the Bigsby's are cool. Obviously, it's a vibe. But yeah, I mean, if it's me and I'm spending too much time on it, like, it's just a limited resource that I can't afford to spend anymore. And I'm not telling you to sell it or get rid of it or anything, but like, just keep throwing money at it. That's all,
So no, I'm not gonna sell the thing. I'm not gonna do anything like that. All I'm gonna do is just throw the bridge back onto it, the ABR1, because at least the strings weren't popping out of the saddles. So maybe I'll take because I do have nut files. I'll just sand them out a little bit and file them a little bit, not sand them, and throw in some nut lubricant and call it a day. Because I mean, it still sounded great to me, and when a guitar's isolated on record versus in the context of a mix, you hear a lot more of those little problems, but you never notice it because even some of the stuff I sent you didn't notice it, and that guitar still had those little ringing problems in it with all those things on it. So it was just one of those things. It was $50. I bought it used, so I'm not going to invest any money on it. But when it comes to the trem, I think that's the reason why I love the Jazzmaster so much and why the Jaguar is my favorite Fender guitar, because the trem system that comes on the Jazzmaster and the Jaguar is the greatest of all time. I'm not a shredder. Neither of us are shredders, but I love surf, and just how abusable that thing is, and it just goes right back to tune. If you know how to set the thing up, it's idiot proof at that point. You can just wham as hard as you can. That looked really funny on film, but it goes beyond saying that I have so much faith in reliability in the tuning stability of those instruments. It's just the physical tones themselves, from the bridge pickup and then the actual just the playability. It's just little things, but it's funny that you would think that the bridge would be the thing that would drive me nuts about a guitar like that. No, the bridge is the biggest selling point, and it's funny because the Jaguars I've had that I've kept for myself, I've never had that problem. It's just this one of those things. I love them. I love Jaguars.
I'm going to ask you a really stupid question because I'm not a Fender guy. I've only become a Fender guy, or even a Fender appreciator sort of later in my years, right? As all of us metalheads do, it's a rite of passage. When you get to a certain point, you just start to like Fenders for some reason. Although I will say I still really, really don't like Strats. It's just not my bag. But I've never played a Jaguar. I've played a Jazzmaster. But the Jaguar, I don't know. There's like the little kid in me that always just goes like, ooh, what are all the knobs for? And I don't know. I mean, when it comes to the offsets, I guess there's just like so many from Fender that I always feel kind of overwhelmed by them. Like I'm like, there's the Jazzmaster, there's the Mustang, there's the Jaguar. Then like I think Nirvana, like Kurt had the combo one that was like the Jag-Stang and stuff. And then obviously now that they're just like pumping out all these the parallel universe ones or whatever, there's even more of them. So like I don't know. What do you think the Jaguar is the king of the offset, and what do all the knobs do?
My favorite between the big three, which is the Jazzmaster, the Jaguar, and the Mustang, is easily the Jaguar. And the knobs are so easy. I'm going to show you. I'm going to grab it. It's right behind me. I'm going to show you how easy this is. Hold on. This knob right here bypasses everything on here. So this will just, if you switch this up, it's just the neck pickup just by itself. And then your master volume and tone right there. That's it. So if that's down.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, this does nothing else. So if you're just like jamming or whatever you want to do, you want to get back to the neck pickup, that's it. And then you could have your volume, if you wanted to tone down a little bit, it's really cool for that. These three switches, that's just the neck pickup. So on or off. That's just the bridge pickup, on or off. That's just series or parallel, on or series or parallel. It's super easy. A master tone for all of these together, and then a master volume. So I mean, it does look intimidating, but it's kind of
not repetitive, right?
No, it's very redundant.
Yeah,
it's not hard. And of the three of them, because the Jazzmaster doesn't have this. All it has is the actual switch. It has a 3-way toggle switch, so it's even more simple than that. The Mustang is a little bit more different. It has the 2 knobs on the side. And all that is just the one knob controls the neck pickup. The other knob controls the bridge pickup. That's it. So you just move them and then kind of dance around accordingly like that. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love the offset shape, and I've always wanted to grab one. And, I mean, I feel like, I don't know, the sort of like the studio guy in me always wants a Jazzmaster, right? Because I love P90s. I have too many guitars with P90s at this point. But I don't know. Maybe a Jaguar is the way to go. The Mustangs always look a little funky to me. Like they're a little too tiny.
You would look weird with a Mustang.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well,
I think that's probably true.
I'm gonna give you 2 things here. First of all, the Jazzmasters don't come with P90s. Those are not P90s.
Oh, they're not?
They're not even
close.
What are they? They're not even close. They're Jazzmaster pickups. I got to do it. I've had people asking me to make this video talking about the difference between the P90s that are in the Gibson versus the Jazzmaster single coils, because they are in a different universe as far as tones.
Well, they're huge. They look like P90s. They're massive.
I know. I made that mistake too. However, so to me, as somebody who likes, I like rock and I like that kind of music. I like bite and edge. This is the guitar. Out of all the offsets, this is the one. And this is the one that feels the most like a rock guitar to me, because you don't get thrown off by the fact that it's a 24-inch scale length. This thing sounds gigantic, dude. The Jaguar does everything from like really clean, but like I said, the complaint I have with the Jazzmaster, the bridge pickup, it doesn't do rock, like not the kind that I like. You know what I mean? And for somebody like you, I think you would be really disappointed if you got a Jazzmaster with Jazzmaster pickups already in it and you plugged it into some gain. You'd be like, oh, what the hell is this? This sounds like the weakest tin garbage. You'd be like, something's broken, or I need new pickups. But the Jaguars, man, this guitar could sound so aggressive, but then it can also sound so sweet when you play around. Just a little bit of settings to it. You have a very abusable trem. Like I said, it's not hard to set up. And it's comfortable, man. And it's got a good weight to it. And the one thing that I like and dislike about the Mustang is so light, but sometimes when you're playing a guitar that's that light, it doesn't, I don't know, like, I kind of like having that little bit of weight, especially when I'm playing aggressively. I like it. I don't want to be playing a feather if I'm playing aggressively, and the Jaguar is just, to me, it's the best of the 3, and it's my favorite, and it's a damn shame I don't have one. I mean, this is my kids. Like, I sold the 50th anniversary blue Jaguar I had to fund moving back to California, so I never replaced it, and it's one of those guitars that they're hard to find the right one of. It sucks.
Yeah. What are their current models?
None.
They don't have any?
No. So hear me out. You have the classic vibes, right? Which is the body this one's based on. You have the 65. No, that's not the 65 anymore. The American Original 60s. And that's a $2,150 guitar before tax, if you can find them in stock. At Sweetwater, I think it comes in surf green. Those are back ordered till February.
Oof.
The Daphne blue ones, the other color, I think there are a total of 5 or 6 on all of Reverb new. So the only other options you have outside of the classic vibe You have the Mexican ones, which have a humbucker in the bridge, and I don't like Pal Faro, dude. I'm never gonna buy a guitar with Pal Faro. It's just it's not for me. Not a Fender guitar with Pal Faro. It looks wrong. I like rosewood. So it's either that or you go to the custom shop, and then once you get to the custom shop, I mean, you're talking. Look at the price differences, man.
Yeah.
The price difference of the custom shop.
It's ludicrous. Yeah.
$4,600 new for a Jaguar, and to me, $4,600 for a Jaguar, I could buy a Sunburst, God forbid, or maybe a white one if I was lucky, like a 64 or 65 real one for that kind of money. So it's a hard sell. That's a hard sell.
Yeah, yeah. They've got the Squires, a Vintera, there's a Kurt Cobain and a Johnny Marr. Sorry.
Yeah, the Johnny Marr's impossible to get. They're never. That's another guitar that's almost never in stock.
They got a player.
Yeah,
a player,
I know, and it has humbucker in the bridge.
Yeah, which is kind of like what's the point?
But it's not. But to me, it's not a Jaguar at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know what. I'm not a purist with Telecasters. Like, it's funny because with Telecasters, it's a much more traditional and older instrument. I don't mind throwing TV Jones pickups, a humbucker, a Bigsby, all sorts of crazy stuff. But when it comes to the Jag and the Jazzmaster, like if I see a Bigsby on a Jazzmaster, I just want to vomit. I think it just looks wrong. Just like these guitars are just, to me, they're perfect with the pickups and the trem as it is. I don't see the point in changing them. And the Vinteras, for that kind of money, I can get made in Japan stuff, and it's better.
Yeah. Agreed. I don't know. What are your thoughts on? I've been hearing good things about the Squire stuff lately. What are your thoughts about trying a Squire on one of these?
I told you, this is a Squire.
Yeah. Is it one of the newer ones, or is it?
Yeah, this is a classic vibe. This is a classic vibe Squire body, and but I put an American vintage 65 neck on it, and it fit right in, no problems. Because I hated the neck. I hated the neck on that guitar. It was one of those ones where, no. If you were to take some really fine sandpaper to one of those and get rid of that gloss, then you'd have a decent guitar. The only problem with those is the bridge isn't fit right from the factory on the Classic 5 Jaguars. So it doesn't reliably go back into tune. You actually need to either get a mastery bridge, which is what this guitar has in it right now, or you need to put painter's tape or electrical tape around the post so that it won't move as much, because this bridge is actually designed to move as you use this tremolo, but there's such a gap in the Classic 5 model that it doesn't reliably go back. So it's funny, if you ever watch any of my old Jaguar videos when this was still a full-on Squire, everybody in the comments, there's a bunch of people that would be like, I can't get this damn thing to stay in tune. What's wrong with it? I love the way it plays. I love the way it sounds, and I love the way it looks. It won't stay in tune. And Pusheen, really big YouTuber, he went over the same exact thing in one of his videos. It's just a design thing that they overlooked.
I gotta say, I have like a pretty hard cutoff at $300 for mod projects. This is a little too expensive for having to replace everything on the way in,
Yeah, well, I got that guitar with hand wound American pickups in it for $300.
Yeah, and at that I do it for
$480.
$480.
Exactly. Yeah, and it was pink, and I was just like, well, my kid's gonna love it, but and then one day she will love it. She's gonna grow into it. I mean, like, I don't look at that as my guitar. Like, I play it for the channel because I like to give tonal diversity with all the different kinds of guitars. But I mean, it's not my guitar. So one day I'll get myself a Jag. It's probably my favorite Fender outside of a Telecaster.
Well, I know you got a line into the Japanese stuff. So if you see one, looks like a good deal, let me know, because you got me sold.
I did a video about it today.
All right. I was at doctor's appointments all day. I'll check it out.
No, it's really cool. It's very, very modern. The one that I talked about today. It's got the 9.5-inch radius, so it's got the Mustang bridge, not the vintage bridge. So it's a lot more reliable as far as being able to set it up without being an expert with offsets. It's got a little bit hotter pickups in it. It's an alder body, Sherwood green, gorgeous.
I don't love 9.5-inch radius, but everything else there sparks my interest.
Well, what you would want the vintage radius?
It's obviously not a shredder, but I still like flatter radius. It's just it's weird.
Well, no, so Well, no, then you would want the 9.5 because that's as flat as you're gonna get on a Jaguar ever.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I point. And it's got a U-shaped neck to it, and so it's really comfortable. You would like that guitar. You would like that. I have had those guitars in before. If you ever come down here, I get these things in stock all the time. It's a rotating thing. I'll make sure I have a Japanese Jag. It's not like they don't sell. I just won't list it for sale, and if I know you're coming, I'll wait a few days.
Yeah, man, sounds good. I'll definitely I'll take a look at one when I come down for sure, and we can talk offline about some prices and whatnot, because you've sparked my interest for sure.
Yeah, I'll get you a really good deal. What colors do you like on a Jag? Do you care if it has the matching headstock or not?
I hate painted headstocks. I know that's an unpopular opinion.
No, it's not.
I hate painted headstocks. I can't. I don't know. Every time I see somebody's like, "Oh man, you get the matching painted head," and I'm like, ugh, just something I want. Honestly, I don't even really like Fenders with rosewood fretboards. I kind of feel like I want my Fender with a maple neck, personally. But I'll put that one aside as long as the headstock isn't painted.
All right, then the made in Japan stuff, I got plenty of options for you. You could even just do. They even make brand new ones that are black. You want to be boring?
No. I especially once I bought that PRS from you with the grandma pink. Like I am all about the weird colors for sure.
No, I love that guitar. When you do come visit, you got to bring that pink PRS. I want to play it. I was close. Yeah. I could go on and on. I almost just brought up another thing with PRS guitars, but I'm not going to do it. So that's we've been going for a while. Yeah, I know, and it sucks. Yep. But I'm going to turn this off. So thank you all for listening. I know that this is going to be more chopped up than normal. I'm not sure if it's Dave or if it's myself. Probably me because it's my life that the internet is not acting in its best way. So we're just kind of dealing with it as we can go along. We appreciate everybody who stuck around to the end. Please subscribe. We are close to the goal of 1,000 subscribers, and I will see you tomorrow for the live stream, which will be 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday. So that's it. Take it easy, you guys. All right. Let me just stop.